I think it's just about I think because I think one of my biggest traits is resilience and positivity. When you asked me before, Ezekiel, like how do you stay resilient? And I think part of it is like confidence in yourself and reflection on where you went wrong and how you can improve. Um, but I think it's just I'll tell you another cool thing to check out. I can't remember if I already shared it with you, but
Yeah. I lay on the scale, you gotta glow, you gotta glow. She had my attention, she gotta know.
I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of the Let's Get It podcast. I'm your host Zeke, and in this episode I have Alex to speak about his journey in the creative field. I'd like to give a content warning for any strong language used in this episode, and hope you have a nice day and enjoy the show. One, so I'd like to thank you for joining the podcast.
thanks for having me, Ezekiel. It's good to be here.
No problem. So the first question I'd like to ask is, what would your origin story be, and how would you like to represent it?
Can you say that question again?
What would your origin story be, and how would you like to represent it?
Sorry, I can't. Sorry, the connection's bad. Say that again.
What would your origin story be, and how would you like to represent it?
Origin story.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I like it. It's like a Marvel question.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, apologies for the background. We're painting the house at the moment, so it's all kind of patchy. But the origin story, so do I get to make one up?
It could be made up. It could be real. It's up to you.
Well, I want to make it up because it's way more interesting than the real thing. My origin story is I was walking to school one day and there was this truck of like toxic liquid. And then this truck kind of turned this corner too sharply, covered me in toxic liquid, and didn't give me any superpowers. It just made me slightly poor vision. And that's why I wear glasses today. That's my origin story.
And how would you like to represent it? Like a book, comic, movie?
I don't know if anyone would watch that movie. It probably needs to be shorter, like maybe a tweet. So yeah, something short and sweet.
And with that, so you're in the creative field. Wait, is you there? So you're in the creative field. So how did that start? And what brought you there?
It's a good question. I back in high school, I used to love doing graphic design, and my mom was super creative. She's an artist, so I was always doing drawings and kind of paintings at home, and she was super encouraging of that. And so I was doing graphic design at school and I was really enjoying it. And I remember doing one particular assignment, and our teacher came around and looked at all our different progress and how we were performing. And she looked at this one design I was doing and she said, "Oh, that kind of looks more like advertising. Like you have a headline and a point of view and you're trying to change someone's attitude and it has a tone of voice." And I've never even considered advertising before. I hadn't even really thought of that as a career. But as soon as she said that, it kind of planted a seed in my head. And I looked into it and it seemed like a super interesting kind of career, kind of a really unexpected road to take, and you get to be creative for a living. And so I looked at it and I found a university. That's what we call them in America, in Australia, university. I found a university that offered an advertising course, and I tried to get in, but I didn't get in. And so I went traveling instead, and I went traveling for 2 years through Europe, and I moved to London. And I kind of wanted to figure out, after 2 years, do I still want to do advertising, or was it just kind of a phase? But after 2 years, I still really wanted to do it. So I tried to get into the university again, and I didn't get in again. So I started applying for this portfolio course called Award School. In Australia, award school is a really popular portfolio course that happens in every city in the country. And basically it lasts for 3 months and it's super intensive. and you work with people who already work in advertising to work on how to come up with ideas, and you build a book of ideas. So I applied to get into that, but I didn't get into that either. So I've got this kind of history of applying to things and not getting in, but I'm pretty persistent, and I'm pretty good at like looking at how I failed and trying to get better the next time. So next time I applied, I called a friend who was in advertising, and I think I got a little bit closer. And then the third time I was working in a burger joint in Melbourne, Australia. And the head, like the guy who runs the whole course, award school, came in. And I said, "Oh, you run this course?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, I've been trying to get in for like 2 years." And he's like, "Well, come over to my agency and I'll have a look at your ideas and we'll see if we can, improve your chances this time." And so I went over to his place, his agency, looked at the ideas and applied for a third time and finally got in. And it was an awesome course. I had amazing tutors who were super, super really, just really welcoming and kind and generous with their time, and helped me be a better creative. And in this award school in advertising, I don't know if you know Ezekiel, but you pair up with as a team. There's like an art director and a copywriter. So an art director, in terms of the craft, usually takes care of everything visual, whether it be layout of photography, whether it be film, whether it be a layout of design, whether it be logos, everything visually related. And copywriters look at everything in the written word, whether it be headlines, scripts, taglines, things like that. And you come together at the start of a creative process, and you come up with an idea, and then you help craft it together. So I paired up with a friend from this course, and we got a job together, and that kind of started my career in advertising.
So many lessons in that about perseverance and just not keep retrying, but to also retool and see how you can improve and then just take another path. So with that, how did you stay motivated after like 2 times you like, okay, I got rejected? How you kept, what made you keep trying?
That's a good question. I think I've always been pretty resilient. I remember I wasn't a very fast runner at school, but we would play tag, and I would just run after people for a long, long time. I don't know how long. It probably wasn't that long being a kid, but I would just wear people down. I would just keep going after them, and eventually they would stop, and I'd be able to tag them. I would run away. But I think with this advertising thing, I think I knew in myself that one, I really wanted to do it, and two, I knew I had something to offer. It was just a challenge of presenting it in the right way, and I think that takes time, and I think it just takes reflection as well. There's no point doing something the same again and again if you don't stop and reflect how you can improve. So I think it's a mixture of I think trust in my own kind of talent, and then being able to reflect and grow and get better. Have you had similar experiences where you've had to persevere?
Yeah, right now, for me right now, just like getting a job and everything, just those rejections, and then I say like was like college. That was back in college when I got like, because most of so I like to tell was always how many times I changed my major, and after I got a 0 on my midterm, I had to be like, okay, what's to do next? So it was like, okay, this is what's happening right now. Let me just see what is my best plan.
Yeah. It's tricky. It's just, I think it's just good to stop and reflect and what's a different pathway? Like you said, there's different pathways to the same goal, and everyone's pathway is different. So yeah.
And also in your story, you're talking about how like you was able to meet the director of the entire course. Like was like a chance, and you just took your
Yeah, it was
shot.
just like, yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but they say it's who you know, not what you know. But I don't know if that's entirely true. You got to know some stuff. But I think it's just a lesson in take your shots when you've got them. And if someone standing in front of you is a gatekeeper to where you want to get to, then just start a conversation. Like, I'm not the most smoothest talker. I'm not like a mover and shaker or anything, but I think just having a conversation, anyone can start a conversation and start talking. And all I had to say was, I really want to get into your course. Can you help me? And also, what do you want on your cheeseburger? Were the only kind of three questions. And then most people are good enough to offer their time. If you seem like a normal person, they'll be happy to help.
Yeah. A lot of times people say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Totally.
And you have to practice. When you go from a business school, always have to practice your elevator pitch. You have to say who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah, totally. What's your elevator pitch?
It depends on the situation. Usually I would say Zeke Williams. If I'm speaking more like graphic design, then I'll say Zeke Williams. Recently graduated from Blue College with a major in digital marketing, minor in media arts. I currently run my own podcast for the Left Side Podcast. We speak about MMA and different topics, and also do graphic design. I make logos and flyers and animation.
Cool, nice. It's pretty good. It's pretty tight.
And then when I usually talk about like mentoring, then I say the same beginning. Then I switched up and talk about how I was mentoring from my sophomore year, and then I did like different jobs and stuff like that.
Cool, nice one.
Thanks. And so, and in the beginning, your mother was really instrumental in pushing you towards advertisement. So without that, would you have like a idea what you wanted to do, or that was just like aha moment?
I think it would have been a super different pathway. Not necessarily a bad pathway, but just different. Mum was growing up super supportive of. I've got two sisters and a brother, and encouraged us all to kind of to do our art and also read books and kind of digest creative things. I remember, those paint by numbers kids drawings. She banned them from the house. She said kids shouldn't be forced to paint in boxes by numbers. Like, you get to choose, where the colors go and what your picture looks like, which I always remember because I think it's such a good lesson for creativity in general. You need to color outside the lines to do cool, interesting things.
Yeah, I think I have that problem sometimes where I get too boxed into what to do. Like when I'm trying to figure out how to create something, I get too boxed into like what I already know how to do, and I forget to be creative and think about like how can I represent the same information in a different way.
Yeah, I mean it's a challenge every creative has, but it's just practice. I mean, the thing that helps me through the process, and I think this could help you as well, like if you have a task, like a friend wants a poster designed or an album cover or something, like just do it the obvious way first. Get it out of your head, out of your system, and then you can move on. And you have like a bar that you've set. It's like, okay, that's the first thing I thought of. What's next? Because often your first thought isn't the best one. But if you get it out of your head and onto paper, it helps to push past it into more interesting territories that people haven't thought of.
Yeah. And then, do you ever feel like you copy yourself sometimes? Like you just like, when you're creating something and you like been through this path before?
Can you say that again?
You ever feel like you're copying yourself when you're creating something, or like the same elements are in the same piece, in a different piece?
Are you saying, so it's breaking up a little bit, are you saying, does it ever feel like I'm making the same work that I've already made?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. That's a great question. Yeah, I think everyone has a comfort zone and a tone of voice that they're naturally drawn to. So yeah, and that's a really good question. Yeah, and I think it does happen. I think you do. I think it is definitely a thing where you create a body of work that has a similar thread to it, um, whether it's an emotional insight or a certain look to it or a certain tone of voice to it. I think that's super common. But I think it's really important. It's fine if that happens, but I think it's important to be aware that it's happening. So you can either choose to continue down that path or take a left turn or a right turn, because you don't want a whole book of the exact same stuff, and you want to push yourself and um, you know explore different solutions to different problems. So I think the key is being aware of your comfort zone and knowing when to push out of it, and by how far. Um, and the cool thing about advertising is you're kind of forced to. You're working for so many different brands and clients, who have different customers and different ways of speaking to them. Um, so they often set you on a pretty different path from the beginning. Like you wouldn't talk to a 16-year-old high school kid who wants to buy a Nike shoe, um, in the same way you talk to, a 45-year-old mum who's looking for a new phone. They're just two very different ways of talking to customers, and yeah, that's the exciting part. You get to mix up your communication style.
Yeah, because you have to present. Everybody receives information differently, so you have to present it in the way they speak.
Oh, I think I lost you.
Yeah. But sometimes I feel like I'm using the same
Say that again.
idea.
Sorry, man.
I was just saying that everybody receives information differently, so to give it to them the way that they speak. And then I was going on to like how sometimes I feel like I'm taking the same elements, like because it's just like this worked before, and it's like I don't know, I can't think of anything, so it's just like we'll see what worked before.
Sorry, I'm only getting every second word.
I was just saying like I usually just go into like what's like you said the comfort zone, like what worked before, and then and then take that element again. That's what happens to me sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I think is what you're saying. Like you take an element of your comfort zone and then push past that.
I was just saying like it was just like continuing from the earlier point of copying yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
And then with like since everybody receives information differently, when you get a new project, how do you decide how to present the ideas? Like is it like how do you know that you're accurately targeting the right market?
Um, well, we have a lot of people at work who help us. We've got a really talented strategic team who look at the types of people we should be speaking to, and what and how they live their lives and what their interests and hobbies are. Because the more you know about the people you're speaking to, the better you can speak to them. You can relate to them. You know what struggles they have. You know what they get excited by. You know what they're passionate about. So that really helps. And then we have an account team at work who work with the client really closely and help figure out what the client wants to say and how they want to position their product. So there's a few things that kind of happen down the pipeline. It's like, okay, who are we talking to? How do we want to talk to them? And then when it gets to us, it's like, what does that look like when it comes to life? The how. How do we talk to them? How does that literally look? How does that literally sound?
Cool. And was it like when you came from Australia, was like a big difference in like the advertising? You had to like adjust to it when you came to the States?
Yeah, it was. I mean, everything's bigger in America, not just Texas. So like we were pretty blown away by the size of the agency. We'd come from an agency of about 100 people, and this was like 700. So that was interesting. And starting at the bottom again, like no one knows who you are, no one knows if you're good at your job. So I think it was just for us figuring out how we stand out in an agency that big. So that was the biggest challenge. But it was interesting. Like the creative process isn't too dissimilar from our experience. Like you still have a brief and a problem. You have smart people who help figure it out and figure out the best way to make ads. Like if you break it down into that kind of simple start and end, there's the problem and there's a solution. Everything else isn't as important. The size of the agency, people's accents, people's the culture of meetings and corporate culture, it's all kind of periphery. The most important thing is what's the problem and how are we going to solve it.
It's like the structure is still there, the skeleton of marketing.
Yeah, totally. And it hasn't changed too much, which is interesting over the different generations. The output changes, like, you know, in the 50s and 60s, it was, you know, either, you know, a newspaper ad, an outdoor billboard, or a TV ad. Or a radio ad. They were the kind of four options you had. And now it's like limitless. Like there's new ways every day, as you know, like, you know, whether it's, you know, something online or a different way of doing a TV ad, or like a video game where you create a product, or like it's cool. It's a good time to be in the industry for sure.
And like with all these changes, do you ever feel yourself like how does it feel to constantly have to keep up? Like how did you keep up with all the changes?
I think it's just you have to be passionate about culture and what's happening, and have a super diverse range of interests. There's no point staying in your kind of bubble, watching just your Netflix shows, talking to your friends, reading your news, because you're going to end up kind of with a really limited perspective of the world. So I think the biggest challenge for creatives is to push themselves out of their comfort zone, and try to absorb what other people are absorbing. You know, go to blogs you would normally go to walk into stores that you don't normally go to. Like if you're your boyfriend or girlfriend's going shopping for clothes that you wouldn't wear, go with them. See what that experience is like. If go to a monster truck rally. You don't have to be into monster trucks. Just see what it's like, and you might see something cool that inspires an ad like 2 years later. If you don't like sport, make sure you watch sport. It's such an important part of culture. Watch some basketball games, watch some football games. Watch a fashion show, watch a dog show. Just try to absorb as much as you can, because you don't know where it will come in handy down the path.
Yeah, I think people need to do more of that, just trying new things and just seeing why, just to have that idea, why not.
Totally.
And more on that before the changes, and like a lot of ideas have already been done. How do you keep creating new ideas with, like, it feels like everything's been done?
That's a cool question. I think there's a documentary called "Everything Is a Remix." You should look that up. It's a cool doc, and it gives you peace of mind that there's always a different way of doing something, and it's basically arguing that every idea is a remix of a different idea that's already come before it. So even back to like caveman days, like someone started fire with some rocks and some sticks, and then some other guy saw that and decided to put fire on a stick so they could carry it. Someone saw that, and I'm not very good at history, but someone saw that and decided to create, a lantern, and then someone saw that and decided to make electricity, and I think it's just evolving. It's probably a more comforting way to think about coming up with a brand new idea. It's like, how do we evolve something in the most dramatic way possible, where the original source is unrecognizable? I think that's the key. That's what makes an idea feel fresh, is when you can't recognize where the inspiration came from. Even though there was 100% something that inspired that artist or creator, it can't not if that person is living and breathing every day, being inspired by different things around them. That's when an idea feels fresh. If they've evolved it far enough for the thing that inspired them to be unrecognizable. And sometimes music comes along like that. It's like, holy shit, that doesn't sound like anything that's come before it. Obviously, that musician has their inspirations, but they've pushed it so far that it's impossible to know who they're inspired by.
Yeah, it's like you hear the song, and then you hear the sample it came from. It's just like then you're able to make a connection. But if you heard them separately, you probably wouldn't have made that connection.
Yeah, totally, 100%.
And I also watched our podcast and talk about how there's only like 7 stories of like the journey story, revenge, and stuff like that, and how like and then similar to how Hamlet and what you call it, Lion King, pretty much the same story.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's 7 stories. Like, it doesn't seem like a lot. I've seen a lot of movies, and it's crazy to think that they all follow 7 structures.
Yeah, I forgot. I can't think of all of them on top of my head, but yeah. And then even shonen anime is pretty much similar to that. It was just like they had their set structure, and granted, you can see the patterns happening over and over again. Okay, cool. This is their type of story.
Totally.
And I think Marvel movies having the same problem too, where people was like, okay, you can see the beat coming in.
Yeah, Marvel have a problem for sure. It's the same. It's so much of the same. The origin story, especially. they get their powers, they find a bad guy, they don't want to fight the bad guy, then they get inspired to fight the bad guy, and they win. But
Right.
I mean, I think they're starting to do more interesting things. Like Logan was super cool, Deadpool was super cool. I think the Thor movies are awesome. I love that director. He's a New Zealander. I don't know if you know him.
I can't think of the name off the top of my head. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. That whole franchise.
And because how Iron Man, the first one, and then Ant-Man, the first one, was pretty much the same story of superpower guy in
Was
the
it?
suit. Like superpower guy in a red suit fighting the bald guy who was pretty much the antithesis. Was pretty much the same as him, just a different suit
Yeah,
over the control of a company.
yeah, it's
It's
the
just,
same.
yeah.
Yeah, they need to. I don't know. I get sick of them. I've kind of stopped watching the Marvel movies. Um, there's more interesting stuff out there. I don't know if you're watching The Boys on Amazon.
Not yet.
You heard of it though?
I heard of it. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Like it doesn't follow the formula, that's for sure. It's kind of the opposite of what you think a superhero is.
It was like, what happen if they were real?
Yeah. What happens if they're real and acted like really douchey celebrities?
And he was like,
So they're super corrupt and um, kind of cruel to each other, and yeah, it's cool. It's interesting.
it was with designing. So going back all the way back to the beginning, what first got you into graphic design? First.
What was that?
What first got you into graphic design? Like you just started making a design.
Yeah, it just seemed like an obvious choice. I think I liked drawing. I liked art. Um, and something about graphic design. I think it was just a cool combination of technology and design. I like tech. I like computers, and graphics felt like a cool merging of the two. Um, but yeah, I'm a copywriter now. I didn't actually go down the design path. Um, at a certain point, I realized I was a stronger writer than a designer. Um, and that was super early on. I think it was like 21 or something. And so from then on, I've been a writer. Um, so yeah, interesting path.
It's still creative, it's just a different expression.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's still coming up with ideas. Um, it's just a different way you execute them.
And it's good that you have like both sides, so you can when you're creating you can see how it will look towards like the art director, and you say, okay, this is like the
What was
better.
that? Sorry?
It's like it's good to have like both. You have like both the creative and like the copywriting, so then you can when you're creating ideas, you can see how it will look.
Yeah, art director and copywriter. Yeah, it's a cool combination. Um, I didn't used to be like that. I think back in the '60s, they used to work very separately, and then there was one particular agency called DDB that brought them together, and it stayed that way ever since.
Nice. And you found your partner at the university, right?
It was
Oh,
in this portfolio.
the
Yeah,
program, yeah.
my first partner was in that portfolio course, and then we worked together for a few years, and we made some great work. And then I moved to a different agency, and I worked with a different partner. And then I moved to a different agency, and I work with my current partner now. We've been together, I think, 5 or 6 years. So yeah, that's common too. You can change partners. You can stay with your partner. I mean, it's a tricky thing to find the right creative person that you can work with, 10 hours a day, every day with. It's like a relationship. Um, so it's important. It's important to find a good one.
And I think it's just, I'm guessing it's more of like personality and then just workflow to see if those match. Those two main things match.
Yeah, totally. I think the most important thing when you're starting out is finding someone with the same ambition, who wants to be as good as you do, and achieve things that feel big and kind of a little bit scary. Because even if you're not both talented, then you're probably both not when you start out. Like, no one knows much when they start any job. As long as you have the same ambition or same end goal, then you can grow and get better together. So I think that's the most important thing. Find someone with the same ambition.
Ambition. And yeah, nice tips and advice.
What's that?
I'm saying nice tips and advice.
Tips and advice. Oh, that's a good question. I think I think I think it's just about I think because I think one of my biggest traits is resilience and positivity. And you asked me before, Ezekiel, like, how do you stay resilient? And I think part of it is like confidence in yourself and reflection on where you went wrong and how you can improve. But I think it's just I'll tell you another cool thing to check out. I can't remember if I already shared it with you, but do you know the podcast This American Life?
No.
It's an awesome podcast. Definitely worth checking out. They just do great stories about everything in America. And like I was saying before, widen your perspective of the world. That's a great place to start because they look at so many different facets of the world and so many interesting stories and people. But the guy who runs that podcast, This American Life, there's a guy called Ira Glass, and he's got a great YouTube clip that goes for about 5 minutes. It's not very long, so it's definitely worth listening to for anyone who's creative and has felt, has doubted their work or doubted their talent, or just I think like every creative, questions whether this is the right path for them, or looks at other people's work and say, why can't I do that? Why aren't I as good? So this podcast talks about something called taste and the taste gap between where you currently are and what you think is good. So for example, for you, Ezekiel, like if you look, I don't know what design is and what kind of design inspires you, but for example, if you were to look like at an awesome Nike ad for their brand new shoe, and you're like, damn, that's cool. And you might be able to make that design now, or you might not. And if you're in the latter camp, if you can't make it, as long as you have the taste to recognize that's good design, and you have the ambition to figure out how to make that design, then you become a better designer. So it's just a really reassuring video that says, if you have good taste, hang on to that taste and just find a way to get your skill up to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like work towards your inspiration.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, the first step is having those goals that you're working towards, and the next step is finding how to get there.
And that could be any path.
Yeah, it can be any path. It can be courses, it can be teaching yourself, it can be speaking to other designers. Yeah.
And we almost time. So one more question before the last question. Have you ever like seen a design and you just like, consider we just said you just like you've been inspired by it? You just like it one of the times like what you wish would have done of that?
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. Trying to think of one. It didn't make the final Tokyo Olympics logo, but there was a logo that was floating around, and it's still floating around. If you look up Tokyo Olympics logo, you'll see it. But it was such a perfect logo for Japan and for 2020. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sick. They should have used that one. I mean, obviously, it would have been a waste now because it's going to be 2021. But I love that, just like such a simple soul. And I think the good ideas seem so obvious, and you kind of kick yourself and go, why didn't I think of that? So yeah, I really like that one.
Nice. It just makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So time running out. The last question I would like to ask is, what would you name your origin story?
Name my origin story?
Yeah.
Maybe like so my origin story, just recapping, it's toxic waste falls on me and I lose my vision. So I think I would call it the top one. Four Eyes.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you for being a guest.
Cool. Loved it. This was really fun. Thanks, Ezekiel. Really good questions.
Thank you. Off the top of the head. In the moment.
Yeah, I loved how you were reacting in the moment to what I was saying. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, try to get better at that. That brings another episode of the Let's Get Podcast to a close. I'd like to thank Alex for being a guest on the podcast. For next week, I'm my friend Nate to speak about college, music, and podcasting. I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you there.